song time for today. I wrote words to share with you. I've heard many words that are incredible today. So I'm going to just tell you about some of the things that were about my John. I don't know how you do this and tell a story of 47 years in just a few minutes, but I'm going to try, and I'll try not to talk too long, but what can you do, right? I worked in a mortgage banking and an insurance company in Salem after business school, and I took a part-time job at Lippman's department store because I needed some extra money and I wanted the 30% discount on clothes. One Saturday afternoon at Lippman's, Helen in hats asked if I had met the young man from Portland who was running the men's department. And I said no, I hadn't met him. About that time, he came out of the office to the escalator right where I was. So Helen introduced us. And he asked, could we have a drink sometime? Would you like to have a drink sometime? And then as he's going down, Helen loudly says, and she's a good cook. And I said, my response was, is he even old enough to drink? And I'm not cooking him dinner. As luck would have it, he moved into the same apartment complex that I lived in. And yes, we had that drink. And he fixed dinner. Well, he tried to. If you set a Pyrex dish on a burner that's still hot, it explodes. I could say our relationship started out with a bang. John had just returned from 2 years in the Philippines, and he took a year to travel home. He had found and researched that he could take embassy flights and travel as long as it took him. So he traveled the world. He went around the world coming home. I wondered how he could afford to do that, being just in the service. And then I found out that he had a little business. And he would loan money to sailors that were broke before the weekends. And I think he charged some interest on that money. But it was enough that he could travel home, and he even bought a couple of pieces of jewelry in India. I love those travel stories. They didn't seem real to the girl that came from Dufur, who dreamed of travel and had gone nowhere. He transferred to Portland to become a Lippman's menswear buyer. I took every evening class in Portland that I could for insurance. It worked. We married July 29th, 1972. That brings me to houses, which I think Lori's talked about. John liked older houses, I liked newer houses. So he bought a house before he asked me to marry him. I used to laugh that he bought a house and then he needed my furniture. We moved more than once. We've had 2 houses in Laurelhurst, 3 in Westland, and 2 in Canby. But our last home, as Lori related to, was his happy home on hole number 2 at Willamette. John introduced me to travel. 6 months after getting married, Lippmann sent him to Europe for 3 weeks buying, and we took a week's vacation. So his boss encouraged me to go with him. We had no children. I did, and my life was never the same. It was the experience of a lifetime. We traveled to London, to Copenhagen, to Israel, on to Rome and Florence, Spain, and then Paris. It was like a fairy tale trip. You know, when you'd only gone to the Oregon beach, it was a fairy tale. And I learned so much on that. I learned to be independent, and I learned to explore during the days. It was like being on a second honeymoon with a little work thrown in. I share this story with you because John opened my eyes to travel, and it became a huge part of our life. During his career, he always wanted me to go to any place that he had not that I had not been to. So I went to New York with them, I went to Hong Kong, it was fabulous, to Europe. And we actually, I feel fortunate to this day that my world was so broadened by our love together of travel. As you've heard many say, John was a great dad. He traveled, on his travels for work, he'd always bring them presents home. I became the invisible parent. You know, it was, once he was there, he would take Lori to softball games, or Scott to wrestling matches, Trailblazer games, or Scott went to every Fred Meyer challenge there was. And his dad was sure that he did that. Hey kids, he loved being a grandfather. He was a wonderful grandpa. He was the one that was chosen to do the bedtime stories, to do the best breakfast, even though now they tell me mine's okay. And he would squirt whipped cream in their mouths when I wasn't looking. Let him ride the golf carts when they weren't supposed to on the road. He cherished you all. John had a phrase that he loved to say when we were traveling, and I never got tired of hearing it. He always said it when it was just the two of us. He said it first when we were having a drink at the top of the Eiffel Tower. He said it in Hong Kong on the Star Ferry. And he said it in India at the Taj Mahal. He would make a toast and say, "Long way from Doofer, isn't it, kid?" And then he would smile and he would laugh. And I loved it every time he said that. He was very, very thoughtful at home. Once he retired early, I got coffee in bed every morning. It was a great time to talk, but I was spoiled. His job was the dishes and make the bed. Maybe do a few weeds, and then it was off to golf. And that's how his day was. He was patient. He was really patient with me. And he was patient with me about Christmas. Each move, it seemed the ceilings were higher and the trees got bigger. On Bronco Court, Steve Bacon probably saved my marriage more than once. He helped either set up a tree or undecorate a tree because I thought I had the ugliest tree ever. And then he would say, "This is not a tradition, Mary. This will not be a tradition." As I added more and more decor, John started telling people that I had like 10 trees or 12 trees. And I'm going, "I don't have 12 trees, maybe a lot, but not 12. And then I realized he was counting a little 6-inch tree that was sitting somewhere in a decor, 8-inch or 10, and I'm thinking, there's no way there's 15 in. That was his story, and I just let him say that. When I got a little overwhelmed, he went back to what some of you Fred Meyer people might remember, Alan Ferguson. Alan had a saying, "Inch by inch is a cinch." So after he carried down totes, and I thought I was overwhelmed, it was inch by inch is a cinch, Mary. John loved his mom, and I loved her too. Maggie's named after her. She raised him, she adopted him and raised him. He was a kind, thoughtful son. When she broke her hip, she was put in we put her in the rehab center here in Canby at Hope Village. And John loved the staff there. They took good care of him, and they thought he was exceptional. He went to see his mom twice a day. He went to see his mom twice a day because he golfed. He went before golf and after golf. He wanted his grandkids to learn about stocks, and so he started them at the age of 6 with Stock Fund, and they picked out stocks. Couple of his recommendations, but they always chose some that they wanted. And so they, over the years, have talked about how those stocks would grow and hopefully that they would have fun. He called it a fun account, I called it a travel fund, of course. And without missing a beat, last week I talked to Mason, And I said his front had gone up. And he said, without missing a beat, "What goes up can come down, Grandma." John taught him well. John faced an unbelievable amount of health issues for years, and he handled them with grace and bravery. He did not want to dwell on them. He didn't want to talk about them all the time. He wanted to live his life. And it was very important to him that people not look at him and feel like he was dying. Because he looked really good, really good. Some days I didn't think he had the strength to go out, but as Jim said, he did. When he spent the last week in the hospital, it was during COVID, and we couldn't see him. And it was very hard for all of us. Because of a mix-up with the doctor, I was able to get in. And we had a very touching conversation. John made me smile with the following words that still warm my heart, and I want to share them again. Some of you have heard these, but it's important to me that I get to say them again. He said, "Who would have thought that a little boy from Ireland would be adopted and years later meet somebody from Duffer, Oregon, have 2 great kids that married the love of their lives and gave us 3 fabulous grandchildren. I'm a lucky man." John came home from the hospital and died that night, Memorial Day 2020. He was home at his happy place, and I was with him. He filled my life with unconditional love and adventure, and I am grateful and thankful for the 47 years that we had together. I miss him every day. John died feeling he was a lucky man. I know I'm a lucky girl because of him, and I'm forever grateful for our years together. Thank you. I just want to take one moment and thank everyone in this room for their love and support through all the times that we had the ups and downs with John's and the illnesses. He always felt surrounded with friends and people that cared about him. And that's just a gift.